In 1960, South Korea was poorer than Ghana. The average Korean earned less than the average Ghanaian. 40 years later, South Korea was 30 times richer. Ghana's average income had barely moved. Same planet, same decades, same human effort. So what happened? Because here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Hard work has almost nothing to do with it. We tell ourselves stories about wealth, that it comes from discipline, from sacrifice, from waking up at 5 in the morning and grinding. And sure, individual success often requires those things. But when we're talking about entire countries, about hundreds of millions of people, the math doesn't work that way. Ghanaian farmers work longer hours than Swedish bankers. Indonesian factory workers put in more physical labor than Silicon Valley engineers. And yet the wealth gap isn't closing, it's widening. In 2024, the average person in Luxembourg earns in 1 month than someone in Burundi earns in 5 years. Not 5 months, 5 years. That's not a hard work problem, that's a system problem. And the system in question? It's been rigged for about 500 years, but not in the way you think. Let's start with the easy answer everyone wants to believe: geography. Hot countries are poor, cold countries are rich. Something about temperate climates making people productive, and tropical heat making everyone lazy. You probably heard some version of this. Except Singapore is on the equator, and it's one of the richest places on Earth. Finland was dirt poor until the 1950s, despite having the perfect Nordic climate. And the Middle East, one of the hottest regions on the planet, sits on more wealth per capita than almost anywhere else. Geography matters, sure. If you're landlocked with no natural harbors, trade gets expensive. If your soil can't grow much, agriculture stays limited. But geography is not destiny, because here's what actually happened. Around 1500, Europe figured something out. Not because Europeans were smarter or worked harder, they figured out how to weaponize capital. Wealth doesn't come from labor, it never has. Wealth comes from leverage, from systems that multiply the value of effort. And 5 centuries ago, Europe built the first truly global system of leverage. They called it trade, but it was really extraction. Ships didn't just carry spices and silk, they carried a new economic logic. Use capital to control resources. Use resources to generate more capital. Reinvest that capital into technology. Use technology to control more resources. It was a loop, a compounding loop. And the countries that entered that loop first built an insurmountable head start. Here's the uncomfortable math. In 1800, the average European wasn't richer because they worked harder than the average Chinese person. They were richer because their governments and merchants had spent 300 years accumulating capital, building infrastructure, and investing in innovation. Printing presses, water mills, joint stock companies, patent law. These weren't just inventions, they were systems that turned effort into exponential returns. By the time the rest of the world tried to catch up, the gap was already massive. And here's the kicker: the gap doesn't shrink just because you start working hard. You need access to the system itself. Here's how this plays out today. Let's say you're a talented engineer in Nairobi. You have an idea for a tech startup. In San Francisco, you could pitch that idea to a venture capitalist and walk out with $2 million in seed funding. In Nairobi, you're lucky if you can get a $20,000 loan, and it comes with a 15% interest rate. Same idea, same skill, different access to capital. That's the trap. Poor countries aren't poor because their people don't work. They're poor because their economies don't have enough capital circulating to fund high-return projects. Without capital, you can't build factories, can't scale businesses, can't invest in infrastructure or education at the level needed to compete. And here's where it gets worse. When a country is poor, global investors see it as risky, so they don't invest, which keeps the country poor, which keeps it risky. It's a self-reinforcing loop, the opposite of the compounding loop that made rich countries rich. Meanwhile, rich countries keep compounding. Their capital markets are deep, their interest rates are low. A startup in Stockholm can access cheaper money than an entire province in Pakistan. The game isn't about working harder, it's about where you're playing. But wait, some countries did break out. South Korea, Singapore, China. How? They didn't wait for permission to get in, they forced their way in. South Korea in the 1960s made a calculated bet. The government partnered with massive family-owned conglomerates, the chaebols, and funneled capital into export industries. Hyundai, Samsung, LG. They didn't build for the domestic market, they built to compete globally. It was brutal. Workers were underpaid, regulations were loose, but the capital started flowing in. And once it did, they reinvested it into education, infrastructure, and technology. The compounding loop finally kicked in. Singapore did something similar. No natural resources, tiny population, but they turned themselves into the most business-friendly port in Asia. If you wanted to move goods or money through Southeast Asia, you went through Singapore. They didn't get rich from hard work alone. They got rich from building the infrastructure that forced global capital to flow through them. China's story is even more extreme. They opened up to foreign capital in the 1980s, but kept tight control over how it was used. Forced partnerships, technology transfers. They leveraged access to their massive labor force to extract capital and knowledge from Western companies. Now they're the second largest economy on Earth. These aren't fairy tales about hard work. They're case studies in strategic capital accumulation. So where does that leave everyone else? Because here's the part that doesn't get talked about. The system isn't designed to let everyone win. Rich countries like it when poor countries stay poor, not because they're evil, but because the system depends on cheap labor, cheap resources, and expensive capital. If every country industrialized tomorrow, if every economy had access to the same capital at the same rates, the competitive advantage rich countries have would evaporate. So the system protects itself. International loan structures that trap countries in debt, trade agreements that favor developed economies, intellectual property laws that keep technology locked behind paywalls. It's not a conspiracy, it's just how the logic works when you've been compounding for 500 years. And the result? A world where your starting position determines almost everything, where being born in Switzerland versus being born in Niger gives you a 90 times difference in lifetime earning potential before you take a single action, not because one person works harder, but because one system has more capital circulating through it. That's the answer. Countries don't get rich from hard work. They get rich from access to capital, strategic infrastructure, and compounding systems that multiply effort. So what do we do with that information? If you're in a rich country, it's a reminder that your wealth isn't just yours. It's inherited from a system built over centuries. If you're in a poor country, it's a reminder that the game is harder than they tell you, but not impossible, because the exceptions prove something important. The system can be gamed. Not easily, not fairly, but it can be done. South Korea didn't wait for permission. Singapore didn't apologize for being strategic. China didn't play by the rules they were handed. They wrote new ones. The question isn't whether hard work matters. It does, but only within a system that rewards it. The real question is whether we're willing to admit that the system itself is the problem, and whether we're ready to build a different one. If you made it this far, you're probably the few who watched the whole thing. Algorithm likes that, so do I. More uncomfortable truths next week.